the title of this workshop kind of surprises a lot of people. Why is a marketing company doing a disaster recovery workshop? And of course, we do 12 workshops a year, one a month. So why are we spending one of those? There's so many marketing topics. Why are we spending one on disaster recovery? We were actually inspired to do this after several clients had several disasters. And some of them are no longer with us because, the disasters were big enough to cause their business to be severely disrupted. One of them was a Gulfstream windshield broken at a time when there were not spares available. John, I'm sure you probably remember this one. And it was a huge financial blow to the company because their G4 was out of commission for some amount of time while they were waiting for spare parts that weren't available. And, they pretty much, their business was hugely, hugely disrupted. And we lost them as a client, because of that, which isn't the most tragic part of it. Of course, there's worse things for a business than losing their marketing company or, not being part of that scenario. But another one of our clients, and these guys are actually still in business because they did everything right and then some, and that's SSC. And they had, within a year and a half, they had a hurricane and a hangar fire. And they are bigger and more, I would say, a bigger and healthier company than they have ever been because of the way that they handled disasters and because of the way the community came together around what happened and everything else. So John asked me this morning, is this about marketing disasters or is this about actual disasters that have a marketing impact? And the answer is both. We want to talk about both because every disaster, if it happens to your company, has an effect on the marketing that we do for them, and it also has an effect on the business in general. So what we wanted to do with this workshop is make it a touch point once a year to create for each of our clients. And we talk about this in office hours. Angel's heard me probably 20 times so far talking to different clients about, do you have a disaster recovery plan? And if you don't, now's a great time to think about it and put that together and things because number one, we don't want you to have trouble. And number two, we don't want to lose you as a client. So as well as, the fact that it's just really important, to have thought about this for your business's safety for, a lot of different reasons. So any thoughts or questions before we jump in to this mess? There are 2 documents that hopefully you've downloaded and printed, and you can scribble your notes on those as we go through this. One is the workbook for this session, and the other is a disaster recovery document. It's a Google Doc that we're hoping that each of our clients is going to actually fill out and keep on hand in case they have a disaster of any kind, whether it involves marketing or not. The stronger our clients are, the better everything is. So, all right. So, hopefully at the end of this hour, everybody will have a better idea of a crisis response plan, risk management skills, at least know what those are. PR strategies. A lot of companies have never dealt with PR or never will deal with PR unless and until something happens. Also clear role assignments, because if those are done ahead of time while you make better decisions when you're not in a crisis than you do when you're in a crisis. So if you can give some thought to this today, that's going to be better. And then you're also going to have a resource kit blueprint, with this checklist of essential documents and tools. Hopefully you will make a folder in Basecamp. We've not done this, but all of the organization that you've been doing, Angel, is kind of inspired. I'm thinking that we should do this for each of our clients that requests it. Have a folder in the Docs and Files section of Basecamp with a disaster recovery plan, whether they actually fill it out or not. let's just build it, and put it there, even if it's blank, at least they will know, that we think this is a good idea. John?
So,
Yes.
question.
Mhm.
Um, Given what we're talking about, and you mentioned the word PR,
Mhm.
there are those out there, and I'm thinking maybe in politics and maybe celebrities who will tell you that any PR is good PR.
Mm. 'Kay.
How do you address that from a marketing perspective if it's not ready, if you're not, if you have issues?
Well, I think Doug is a fabulous example um, of this. Doug Goldstrom, SSC. They had a hurricane, uh, and the way that they managed that, it ended up being, SSC, the airport, they ended up being kind of a hub for a lot of the disaster recovery that was going on in the area, their airport, their FBO. So, yes, it was bad news, but, the way that he positioned the company, the way he pulled the community together, the way that all worked out, I think ended up being good PR for him. Would you disagree? Or
Oh, no, but,
yeah,
that that well, I guess that presupposes you're prepared for
yeah,
stuff, okay?
right. There was also an
You're
airfield inc
prepared. If you're prepared, then that means you've gone through all this. It's only if you're not prepared that some PR would not be good.
I think you're a lot more likely to end up with bad PR if you are not prepared. And, last year we did in our book club the 8-second PR. You don't want it to be 8 seconds. You want it to be, years of preparation ideally, but, sometimes it is 8 seconds that makes the difference. Somebody asks you a question. Does it turn out to be, a good thing or a bad thing for you? That is something that can turn on a dime, but the preparation is something you can do whether or not, you know, uh, the details of the situation, at least you have a plan, right? Because 'Cause you're never gonna know what is exactly is the disaster that's gonna happen to us and how exactly is that gonna play out, but you can say, "Here are some general guidelines of how we wanna handle it if something happens."
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, cool, and, yeah, we have a real small group today, so feel free to jump in if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, or anything else. I don't know if anybody else has any examples of situations where PR has gone well or badly, or where a crisis was handled well or badly by an aviation company. There was one other incident on a field. This also weirdly was SSC. Um, and this was another employee that ended up saving the day. There was a airfield incident where an airplane went down on their field. One of their employees ran out, turned off the engines, got people out of the airplane, and a bad situation didn't become any worse than it already was, because of the way that they handled the situation. And, then, of course, the news crews descend and things happen and everything. But because these guys are really prepared and really on top of things, it went really well for them. And also, they've got a great relationship with the community, which is something you can never um, manufacture on the spot. That's something that has to be built over years of relationships with reporters and local officials and the airport authorities and everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I just gave a couple of quick examples of why we care about disaster recovery as a marketing company. But, of course, there's always more and so on. Okay. So, did a LinkedIn poll. This was actually a while back. Um, and said, what type of disruption is the most common challenge for aviation businesses? A bad review could be considered a disaster, or at least it could be considered a negative event, that you need to respond to and things like that. Um, Airside incident was number one. 1-star review on Google was number two. Data or privacy breach, actually, I don't think people pay enough attention to as well. So, those are some of the bad things that can happen, and of course, there's always more, but those are at least 3 or 4 of the things that could happen.
You know what? The
Mm,
data privacy breach should have at least matching with the 50% for Airside
mm,
nowadays,
mhm,
because there are too many state actors involved.
mm.
And with I know I've been in cybersecurity for
Too
years,
long.
but
Right.
I can tell you that it's very easy. I mean, I could go out if I wanted to and grab some tools from the dark web, and I could become basically a little less damaging than a state actor because they're free. They cost you nothing.
Mhm,
And all you got to do is tell it where you want to go. And if you wanted to pick a country, you want to pick a state in the US, and
mhm.
just click the button.
Right. So, you're absolutely right, and I think those things are not included in a lot of the things that we think about in aviation.
No.
Um, Erica, I know you're on the line, and I know we've talked about data privacy, and I know that's something you take very seriously, or data security. I don't know if you wanted to add anything or, ask any questions. John's, got quite a bit of experience in this area, so that might be a direction we wanna go in this workshop, and we can go wherever we need to because there's so much ground to cover.
Well,
As far as
I have
Yeah,
2 points that,
yeah.
yes, number 1, and I actually relate to both of these things, is number 1 is, data breach because, we have confidential client information and patient information. So data breach is a huge concern for us to make sure that we have all of our websites and everything and our charting all locked down and HIPAA compliant. But we also have the secondary concern, of, like, an aircraft incident or something where there's, a crash or whatnot, and having to respond to that. So having, like, a press release already ready to go in the background saying, "Hey, we recognize this incident. We're participating with whoever's investigating. We're not releasing names at this time," or, whatever, is really, really smart, especially from the industry I come from, which is air medical, where unfortunately helicopters crash pretty regularly. There was one that just happened. So having that ready to go and even like a backup page in the background on your website to be able to post things or take down events or whatever is it's very smart to do.
Totally agree, and you've got an intersection of 2, uh, industries that, for whom this is really, really important, and I know there's a huge tradition of, you know, uh, safety protocols and other things in medicine and also in aviation, but not necessarily the intersection, so, you're kind of breaking new ground here where
Yep, we lay in a really interesting spot in that area, so that's
Mhm.
why I joined because I was really interested on what you had to say on the PR marketing side because that's actually in the air medical world we're trained in, because unfortunately it is such a frequent occurrence.
Right, right. Exactly. So, what we're recommending basically is, um, and of course, in aviation, we have what we call SMS programs for Part 135 organizations. They already have safety management systems in place. And so they probably feel like they're pretty protected because those are pretty extensive and they get audited on those. But they don't necessarily include some of these risks like customer disapproval, data breaches. Those are things that are, they're looking at the aviation risks. They're not necessarily looking at the business risks. Natural disasters, that's not something that is covered uh, under, I think, most SMS systems. So, a lot of those things are, and of course, from the marketing perspective, website outages. So when we host a website for someone, there are actually kind of 4 things that we do to prevent a problem. One is we do nightly backups. Number 2 is we do a staging site whenever we're doing anything that is fragile on a website or any type of changes and things like that. The other thing is that we have Cloudflare, which does caching as like an umbrella over the website. So if somebody comes to the website and the website happens to be down, they're going to be served the last known good cached copy of that website. We'll get notified in the background, this website is down or this website has a problem. We will fix it, ideally before the public even knows, because they're dealing with a copy of the website, from its last known good copy. So I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. We've had clients lose a social media platform. We had one client, or actually he was a team member, John Schwaddle had the largest aviation, um, photography platform on Google Plus back when Google Plus was a thing. Google Plus was discontinued. His entire audience evaporated overnight. And of course he could save his data, and, there were ways to scrape that, and, I mean, but it was not pretty and it was not great. And he's still rebuilding, so some of these things are just really hard to recover from. So what we're recommending that people do is take an hour, with your team and brainstorm, what could possibly go wrong. Rate the severity from 1 to 10, rate the likelihood 1 to 10. Everything ends up with a score, and focus on the top 3 scenarios based on the total score. So you're not trying to solve for the craziest thing that's ever gonna happen, right? Because you can't, there's some things that you can't predict and that you can't, figure out. But as long as you've got your top 3 scenarios, planned for, you're miles ahead of most companies running around on this planet, right?
So, Erica, I have a question.
Mm.
Since
Go
I
ahead.
and I'm gonna
And I know
sound
your
like
background. She's tattled on you, so
well, I'm gonna sound like an idiot, but, with all of the equipment that you take on board a flight, is there any of it that is computer controlled?
So a lot of what we have, is like we have cardiac monitors and everything. Everything that we purchase has already been STC'd, and tested in aviation. So like our AEDs that we carry have an airworthy certificate. They have an STC. So we keep all of that stuff, but we don't have anything that's like remotely controlled per se.
Well, not remotely controlled, but oh, what's a good example? Um, a lot of stuff, maybe such as you mentioned, has what they call firmware in it. It's actually a small module. It's built into the device that actually runs it. So when you hit the on switch, it knows what to do, what to display, and so on. Anything like that?
Yeah, of course. Our cardiac monitors, our AEDs, all those things are all have software in them.
Okay. So then your cybersecurity, your company's, starts with the hiring of people, because if you have a bad person and they don't keep updated on or keep their computers updated, whether it's lack of doing it, whatever, that means a bad actor can get into that computer. And if they can do that, they can get into your software and put in bad firmware updates. It's I mean, everything's open these days. I mean, even airplanes, the FMS gets updated, right? And how do they update the FMS? They go to the internet,
Mhm.
right? And then they put it on a disk or a chip and take it to the airplane and hit the button. Well, the cybersecurity of those companies and those people needs to be addressed if it isn't. Yeah, it's just a worrisome thing. And yeah, I've been in cybersecurity way too long. And I spent years doing it for the military and years doing it in the private sector, but it's reality.
So,
Really.
mitigating strategies for that, John?
Oh, man. That's a whole ball of wax all by itself. But what you have to do is you have to, like I do with you. I mean, I, I spend a lot of time researching cybersecurity problems, and then I have to talk to her so that she doesn't have to do the research, but then she has to follow through. So there's an awful lot of stuff out there, and we talk about it every day. Cybersecurity is a topic we talk about almost every day.
Mhm. Right, and we do have a section in Circle about, security and practices and protocols and things like that, so John
The,
shares updates in that as well, so
the really gross stuff I'll put in there, but if I put everything that they run across, you
Mhm.
guys wouldn't read it because it's too much. So,
Yeah, and that I
and the problem with doing that is if I pick the wrong thing and you guys get zapped, then what?
right.
But almost nobody wants to read it,
Mhm.
because it's very technical, most of it, and it addresses things that you as a company leader don't want to address because it's expensive.
Mhm.
And my response to that is how expensive it is if you lose your company.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have insurance and a company who actually provides, that goes in and does probably what you're doing, goes in and makes sure that our websites are good to go and it can't be hacked and checks
Good for
our
you.
yeah, and I met them at a conference, and I was so impressed by the things that they were showing me. Actually, I was terrified of the
Yeah.
things they were showing me that I was like,
And insurance is nice,
Mm,
but in the process, I mean, you'll get your money back, fine. But how will you ever get customers to trust you again when you start up?
absolutely. Yep. So you have to have it's a two prong. You have to have the insurance to cover you and then actually have a plan to mitigate it.
Anyway, I can digress too much there. I don't do that.
that's cool. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the risks that we take as far as, even doing a disaster recovery, situation because, it's something that people don't really wanna think about. But, I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't, do this once a year. So, yeah. So what I'm suggesting is that we have some materials prepared in advance, from a marketing perspective. We do media kits for, uh, clients, if they want to spend their project hours doing that, that's something that we can do. We also recommend cultivating relationships with media prior to having an event. And, there are lots of reasons for that, but the main one is basically that they're a lot more likely to call you and get your side of the story or listen to your side of the story when something happens.
And
So that
if your company has a brick and mortar shop, disaster recovery takes on a whole new meaning there as well.
right, that's absolutely true. Um, right. So, this disaster recovery folder, I think we need to do this in all of our clients' folders. Let's just make that a task for us this month, even if all it has is these blank documents in it. Because people don't make this a priority, but we need to do what we can to help them, make it easier for them. So we'll get there. All right, moving along. Okay, so what goes in the disaster recovery kit? And this is the physical disaster recovery kit. We have a folder in our house that has all of this stuff. So if the house was on fire, we would grab it and run. Same thing for a business. You want to have a folder uh, that you can grab and run if you need to, or keep in a fireproof safe or whatever you need to do to protect that information. Insurance policies, emergency contact lists, safety procedural manuals. Um, Another thing that's really important, that we've learned about in the past few years is digital logbooks for all aircraft, because an aircraft is worthless without the records. And if you have a hangar fire, if you have a hurricane, if you have something like that and the records get destroyed, even if the airplanes are untouched, you're out of business. You cannot fly. You cannot operate.
And this is
So
actually,
exactly. There are several, incidences where this has happened, where the airplane was totally fine but worthless because of something that happened to the records. Okay, physical documents and other resources. You wanna have safe storage on site, either a safe or a filing cabinet or something like that. Um, Storage off-site where you put copies elsewhere and update those quarterly. We use a time machine for all of our Apple stuff and a Pegasus drive, for the data in our office, and that's where all of the websites get backed up on-site as well as the off-site, with our hosting company and things like that. So all of those things are very important.
And Winston Churchill's quote is absolutely spot on.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what you're planning,
Mhm.
but the planning is essential.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely.
when reality sets in, your plan will not work.
But the fact that you have one, is the important
Well,
thing.
that's what made you think about it.
Right. Exactly. So a couple of resources from our group, Digital Aircraft Records, Vision Aircraft Records does those for people who, own aircraft. Tim Bennell is an aviation insurance guy who's very, very versed in the industry and, the coverages and the possibilities and the whatevers and so on, and he's very good at helping people with their risk management as well. So, um, yeah, and then think about your communication methods. Who does what when, and if somebody is out of contact, who takes over? So you wanna have a backup for every person. Um, there's a little quote over here. "The worst thing that can happen is I couldn't get hold of the boss and a decision had to be made, so I winged it and talked to the press, or I winged it and did this," or, whatever the situation was. Um, in some cases, people will make good decisions, but in most cases, not everybody has all the information, that you would want them to have in the situation. So, you just wanna make sure that you prevent that if you possibly can. Get everybody's cell phone numbers on everyone's cell phones. So, yeah, make sure everybody's cell phone has everybody's cell phone on it, so that you've got all the contact information not on a Slack system or not on a, something in case the network goes down or anything else. So,
But that then becomes
assumes the
a
cells are open.
cybersecurity issue and that your people know how to take care of the device so that nobody gets a hold of what's on it.
That's also true. Yep, agreed. So all of that is a thing. All right. Um, okay. So, and these are all in a document that you can fill out at your leisure. Hopefully today or hopefully soon. Hopefully you can block out some time this week, to do these kinds of things. So make sure that there is a lead and a backup for every one of these things. Evaluate the situation, the physical facility, who's responsible, who's the backup, the aircraft, who's the lead, who's the backup. And you may have a different one for each aircraft. Totally fine. Customer service, who's the lead, who's the backup, communications and PR, who should be talking to the press and who should not. And that's just basically about keeping your messaging consistent and making sure that all of that is available and so on. All right. And we've never done this for ABCI either. We've always focused on our clients, this is what we do. But and we are diverse across several countries. So it is very unlikely that an event would affect all of us. So, one of us could keep the company running for as long as we need to until things come back. Um, Back in the day, I come from the finance industry, and this is part of the reason that I'm so weird about this. In the finance industry, this is a huge deal. And the bank that I worked for was bought by Wells Fargo. It was a local bank. It was bought by a large company. And they had and this was in the '90s, late '90s, early 2000s, all of their website personnel and infrastructure and everything else was in San Francisco. And so, we were able to convince them that we needed to have an offsite backup of the website and the people that can work on the website. So I was able to continue living in Salt Lake City, which was, my ulterior motive. Um, because we were the backup crew for the website. If San Francisco had a power situation or an EMP or something like that, the website would stay up because we had backup facilities elsewhere in the world. Nowadays, you can do that mostly with software or hardware, like Cloudflare, as an example, that does multiple copies of your website in multiple places around the world. So you don't need a separate physical facility. in most cases for most things, but you do want to think about that. If something were to happen to my local area and we were to lose the internet or lose power for some amount of time, how do I keep my business running? Cool. Okay. So, first 24 hours um, in a scenario, what you don't want to have happen is, has anybody seen the Abbott and Costello Who's on First skit? It's an old, old, old vintage comedy sketch where Abbott and Costello, which is this couple of comedians, are talking about a baseball team, and the first baseman's last name was Who. So the whole name of the sketch is Who's on First, and everybody miscommunicates about the question, Who's on first? Who? No, I'm asking you, who's on first? The guy's name is Who, but they never get around to. But it's this complete miscommunication. They really mess up the entire baseball game because they don't know who's on first, or they don't understand, that that's the situation. It was kind of funny. You kind of had to be there. But anyway, what you do not want to have happen in the first 24 hours after a impactful scenario, you want to make sure that you know who's on first, who exactly is handling what, and what are the first 3 steps that need to happen, to make sure that that's the case. And in a lot of cases, you can generalize if there is a situation, we need these guys to do something. And what that is, may depend on the situation, but at least you know who's in charge and who's making those decisions. Cool. All right. Okay. So dealing with the press, this is the part that, as a marketing company, we feel like we have an obligation to help with, because marketing and PR are closely related. John, you had an incident in your business school where you got to experience PR from you had a news person come and interview everybody on the team, and you all had a fun day.
Yeah. Well, we had the anchor from a very large news organization come to school and talk to us about PR and said, if there's an incident, you need to have a person who is educated and understands how to talk to press people.
Mhm.
And he gave example, and he interviewed each one of us and said, okay, assume you're the guy and you respond. And he'd shoot every one of us right upside down the other. It made it sound like what he wanted it to sound like, not what really happened.
Mhm. And these are smart guys. I mean, these are, MBA,
Oh,
executive
yeah.
MBA,
In
right.
fact, when I went to school, when I got my MBA, everybody in there, and see, their class of 29, I think, yeah, I'll say probably 20 to 25 people for presidents, CEOs, vice presidents, etc., of medium to large organizations. And we all had similar experiences with this guy. So,
Yeah, it did not go well.
no, and it was intense.
Right. Okay, so and the problem here is that, you and the press have an adversarial relationship in a crisis. Their job is to report the news. It is also to sell advertising on their station, their channel, their magazine, their newspaper. And the more sensational the story is, the better from their perspective. Your job is to make the least of the story, or to make it seem like not a big deal, which usually it isn't. So in a lot of cases, you have to educate them, you have to do those kinds of things, but you're in an adversarial relationship when a crisis happens. Even if they're your best friend, you're at opposite ends of the scenario, right?
Yeah, well, I suggest that before a disaster happens, that I don't want to say make friends, but to establish a business relationship with some press people,
Mhm.
because I've experienced two things. One where I manipulated the press, not by intent, but I did. and another where I was manipulated by the press.
Right.
That was before I went to business school. So,
Right. So the ideal is where you can make a good news story out of a bad news story
yeah,
because that serves both of your purposes. That is sensational. It's fun to report about. It sells advertising. It sells newspapers. It does what they want and it also does what you want. So, if you already have a good relationship with somebody in the press, when something happens, then you can talk about, well, here's what we're doing and here's what's good about this situation. So that's really how you can do that, and you really want your designated spokesperson to be the person that has the relationships with reporters. So if you can come up with maybe 3 or 5 in your market in your area that you are regularly talking to, sending information to, they're asking you questions, you're helping them in any way that you can. You are on the Rotary together or, I mean, whatever you can do to create those relationships ahead of time, that's ideal. Any other questions about working with the press? And Erica, to your point, if you've got some press releases all ready to go, or, even in the background on your website and you just turn those on when something happens, that really helps a lot because the sooner they get information from your side, the less they're going to make up or from other sources. They don't make stuff up, but they generate material from other sources other than you.
sometimes it sure sounds like it, though.
Right. Journalism is was my first major, so I have a lot of respect for journalists. They're some of my favorite people. Okay. All right, carrying on. Um, Social media, especially if there's been a controversial situation or something like that. This is the triage that we use as a default, as a company, and, if we are doing responses for you on your social media, this is how we do it. Uh, First, assess the message. Is it positive or negative? If it's positive, do you wanna respond? Uh, you know, yes, you can. If you can add value, that's great. In some cases, it's just a thank you. If it is a negative comment or a negative, uh, piece about you, you can evaluate the purpose. In some cases, it's an unhappy customer, a dedicated complainer, somebody whose hobby it is to complain on social media, in which case they're probably well known to the people that read their stuff. Or are they just trying to be a comedian? I mean, any of those is a reason that people respond negatively to these kinds of things. So if their facts are correct, then, the only thing you can really do is if the problem is being fixed, you can explain what's being done to correct the issue, and if the problem is not being fixed, then that's your first job, is to fix the problem before you respond to this person. So just monitor that post, keep an eye on it, and so on. If the facts are not correct, then, of course, you can always gently correct the facts and say, "You said this is not, here's the evidence to the contrary." And as nicely as possible because that takes the wind out of their sails. Any animosity online is just fuel. And Adila, I know you studied this in school, so you may have some things that you want to add to this.
Yes, about the whole, if you talk about, uh, you know, commenting, if we try to, um, uh, mm, correct them in a more aggressive way, they tend to get more negative, and they might try to pull out more negativities from our profile, like they would to fight against us. They would go visit our profile and then start commenting on each of our posts and show the people that, okay, these guys are not very well researched and stuff like that. So it is very important, first, when we are already creating the content, we should be very careful about these things and eliminate any of these aspects beforehand. And if there is a problem, then obviously this is a very great process to mitigate that. So yeah.
Yeah, Absolutely. So, we do want to revisit this every year. We've been using this same process. This is actually from probably 10 years ago when the internet was a baby. So, um, but honestly, I don't know that we need to change anything because people are the same, the reactions are the same. It's kind of the same dynamic, the same chemistry. If you feed the trolls, more trolls show up. So, we just want to make sure that we don't do that. We want to be the grown up in the room, even if what is being said is unfair, ridiculous, whatever, we wanna be as, um, kind, even to the trolls as we possibly can. They hate that. So it's kind of nice in a way to, um
See, that happened to me in person.
Yeah?
And yep, where they press people didn't go with what they knew to be correct and what I knew to be correct.
And you corrected the facts very diplomatically, I'm sure.
Didn't actually because
Yeah.
the CEOs and presidents and so forth of that organization were in the room with me. It wasn't my job.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and then you wanna make sure that you go through the dedicated person. So, if that is somebody in your company that is charged with managing the social media, you wanna just trust them to do that. If that is ABCI, then we need to have an escalation path to you. So, at what point do you want things escalated to you? At what point do you want us to just manage things in the most efficient and professional way possible? But at some point, it's going to require some specialized knowledge and things like that. And, once we turn it over to the subject matter expert, they need to understand that, we need to be as positively neutral to positive as possible when responding to comments and things like that. All right. So if you are on the web, you will get obnoxious comments. That is just the reality of the internet. So, we just need to be the grown up in the room. It is easier said than done. As somebody who has gone into the occasional rabbit hole myself. And um, yeah, exactly. Okay. So, take the time to complete the document. There's a Google Doc that you can make a copy of, or you can save it as a Word document, whatever you're comfortable with. And just make sure that you get that and make sure that you fill it out as soon as possible. And that's a really great first step. If you want to take it another step and do a media kit or anything like that, then let's talk in your next office hours or on Basecamp. You can assign us that task and we can give you an estimate of how long that would take, depending on what you want to go in it and so on, and what materials you already have, that we can include or deploy in that scenario. I love this quote from Christopher Parker. Procrastination is like a credit card. It's a lot of fun until you get the bill. So, disaster recovery is something that is easy to put off, but it's really, really one of the things that you will be so grateful to your future self at some point in the future if you do this, because if you've been in business for more than 10 years and you have not had a disaster, you are in the minority. Even small, large, medium, whatever, just doing business in the real world causes problems, and, being able to manage those is a great thing. So, anything you wanna jump into more or anything that you want to review from this? I'm gonna go back to our, agenda, and, yeah, let's turn it over to anybody who has any particular thoughts or questions on any particular thing.
Um, I wanted to add, and the thing is that in aviation, you see, when a disaster occurs, so there is also, if public is involved, like if public concerns are involved, they also the company also set a hotline. So anything you want to talk about this, like in the context of our clients, etc., and how we can like incorporate a hotline.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in the larger companies and airlines and things like that, they have a scenario where they turn a conference room into a war room, and that becomes the central communication point for response to the press, response to the families, response to anything, if there's a flight that is even delayed or missing for a certain amount of time. They have some very specific protocols. And that's in the airlines. In private aviation, it's not quite so clear cut, and we don't really have the resources to go to that level. But it's a great model to look at and say, if we have a crisis, we're going to stop everything and do this. And, these are the thresholds at which we decide to make these kinds of decisions, and we know exactly who's in charge of what and how to go about it. And that ends up resolving the situation a whole lot better. There have been many instances of airline flights that have been saved by getting the right people on the radio at the right time, and so it's so important for the physical safety of everybody as well as the management of the situation. So there was a movie we were watching, John. Do you remember what movie that was where they did the war room for an airline? It was one of the airline movies. I think Rob Mark just did a podcast about that as well.
Yeah, I remember the movie, but I don't remember which airline it was.
Yeah, but they handled it really, really well. And it was an old movie, actually. It was a John Wayne movie. And that was way back in the 50s, 60s, something like that, that an airline, pretty much shut everything down and devoted all their resources to getting this flight down. And it, of course, had a happy ending because it was John Wayne. But yeah, in real life, this is really important as well. Other questions, thoughts, ideas, contributions?
Uh-huh.
Yes, John, please continue.
Okay, John, and then Adila.
Oh, no, I just was clearing my throat, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Adila then.
Okay, so I just wanted to add that this is very good thing to have everything in plan, because I remember when I was in third semester or fourth semester, so we were studying aviation safety and aviation security, and at the end of the semester they made us do this exercise where an aircraft was they we had aircraft props, and aircraft was it was shown that the aircraft is crashed, and then it was very real activity. We had medical stuff going on, and then we had investigation team, and then PR team, media team. So they make us go through all of the steps in case such disaster occur. So I think when we are planned, we tend to do much better, and if we are not planned, then it's more of like a panic, because no one knows what to do and how to manage everything. So I think we should do this as ABCI as well, and we should do this for our clients as well.
Yep, absolutely. And, that's the interesting thing because we've always focused on our clients. We've never done it for ourselves.
Yes.
So, that's a really good example of, what is the word? Cobbler shoes, the story about the cobbler whose children had no shoes because he was so busy making shoes for the other kids in the town. And so, yeah, we need to do this for ourselves as well.
Yeah, we do business plans for 1, 5, 10, and 50 years, but
We've neglected this bit, right?
from the data perspective, we have not, but from other perspectives, we have.
Yeah, we are absolutely as solid as we can be from the data perspective, but we don't have we haven't really brainstormed all of the things that could go wrong other than data and, those kinds of things or anything along those lines. So,
It is not cheap for all the cyber security crap that I have put in place for this.
mm-mm.
And it takes a lot of research to figure out how to do what I've done.
Yeah.
But a long time ago, and so we're good.
Right. Cool. So I think, that's a task for us as well to start working on this. Um, all right. So I think, what we'll do for clients is we'll create that folder, whether they have participated in this process or not, we'll draw their attention to it in our office hours and things like that. And, again, this is a hard sell. This is from a marketing perspective, this is really hard to market disaster recovery as something that you need to do because it's so much more fun to work on sales and marketing and new campaigns and other things besides disaster recovery. But, this is really, really important to do. And I never want to lose another client because they had a situation that we could have assisted with.
And in fact, this is not marketing per se,
Mhm.
but a particular corporation that I with thought they had a disaster recovery in place. And they had a brick and mortar, obviously. But when it came time to execute the plan, not one of their employees was on board with it.
Yeah.
And so then they go, oh, crap, now what?
Yeah.
Because it involved, since it's a brick and mortar and they've got a large data center, then they bought into this thing of some company that provided hot backup site, but it was in New Jersey and every employee refused to go,
Yeah.
which meant they were basically out of business.
So they had to come up with a plan B pretty quickly.
And they asked me to do that, and the rest is history. But, you have to make sure that your people are on board with whatever you come up with.
And are aware, and you're not springing on them. Everybody's got plane tickets to New Jersey, and everybody's like, "No, we don't."
Well, and this is marketing, so that may not happen, probably won't happen. But the fact is, whatever your backup, your disaster recovery planning is, just make sure your people are on board with it.
Right, and they understand their role in it, and ideally, if they've been part of the planning of it, then that really helps a lot because it's like, well, this is what we decided to do. We need to pull the trigger on this, and yeah. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then I'll be back for group office hours, and this may be something that we want to work on in group office hours with anybody that would like to have some extra time for some of these things. So. Anything else we need to add? Or are we good to break?
I just want to tell Ericka, I wish you'd been around, your company been around quite a while ago when I was flying helicopters because we had nobody and could have used you.
That's why I started it, because that's exactly what my experience was, especially being the director. And, we were flying a lot of people that didn't need to be on helicopters or airplanes. So here we are.
Yeah, another time I'll regale you with one of the things that happened.
All right, sounds great. I love telling war stories. Okay, I'll see you in group office hours.
All right, we'll see you in a few minutes.
All right, bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for being here and participating. That was fun.